Five Nights at Freddy's is no stranger to a bad ending. And I don't mean an unfulfilled or rushed one, not an actual bad ending. I mean an ending that results in an ultimately tragic outcome. In Fnaf's case, it often has an upfront good and bad ending, with the bad ending more than not being the canon one. Fnaf 3's bad ending, where the souls don't move on, seems to be canon considering Ultimate Custom Night and the trapped souls later, and the puppet's continued existence post Fnaf 3. In Sister Location, the bad ending where Michael gets scooped is canon, while the good ending where he fights Ennard and the end is left ambiguous, whether revenge or roommates, is not real. Fnaf 4's ending always results in the crying child's untimely death. Ruin always ends with Cassie trapped underground. Secret of the Mimic has Arnold seemingly dying at the Mimic's hands, while the best secret ending is very unlikely to be the real one. In short, Fnaf is not unused to sad, tragic endings. In fact, I'd say its true happy endings are rare. I can actually only think of one entirely happy ending that doesn't result in death. And the books are no different, but between you and me and the lamppost, I didn't realize that one of Fnaf's many tragic endings was hidden in the Silver Eyes Trilogy. And this is mostly because I overlooked it, but it's clearly there, hidden on a single page, staring us right in the face. And today I'm telling you what I found. First, I'll quickly recap the Silver Eyes, the Twisted Ones, in the Fourth Closet. I know if you're here you probably don't need a recap, but this is for anyone who hasn't seen me analyze Circus Baby to death. The Silver Eyes Trilogy follows Charlie Emily, the daughter of Henry, one of the former owners of Fredbear's Family Diner and Freddy's. After her father's death, Charlie returns to her hometown and ends up meeting up with her old friends and sneaking into and revisiting the old Freddy's, therefore making herself and her friends a target of William Afton, going as Dave Miller, who is also a serial killer who kidnapped and killed many children, including their friend Michael. This is the first book in totality. Charlie confronting the death of her father, revisiting her past at Freddy's, her connection, remembering Fredbear's Family Diner and her missing twin brother Sammy, reconnecting with her friends and John, a would-be love interest, and confronting William Afton, the killer, leading to him being in a springlock failure and getting trapped in his suit. At the end of the book, Charlie reaches some form of closure and leaves town once more. By the second book, she returns to town and starts going to college in the nearby city of St. George. Her and John start a sort of steady romance, even though in the first book Charlie was against it because he reminded her too much of Freddy's. Though unfortunately, her progress towards her new life is suddenly thrown asunder when she starts having repeated nightmares of Sammy and a door and being trapped. She is also being chased by a bunch of mutated, twisted animatronics who have been killing others searching for her. They are being led by William Afton, who has survived and now has taken on the identity of Springtrap. At the end of the book, Charlie is attacked by Twisted Freddy and is killed, or seemingly killed, as at the very, very end, a woman who looks like Charlie walks up to the diner where her friends are. The woman, in a red dress and long boots, comes up to hug Jessica and Marla, but John is hesitant, claiming that it isn't Charlie. And it's not Charlie, as the third book involves Charlie's doppelganger, who is actually Circus Baby, working with William Afton to kidnap kids while trying to also find and locate Charlie's body, who is still alive. John, now the main character, teams up with Jessica and ends up finding Charlie, who eventually is forced to confront her doppelganger and finds out from her that the real person who was taken all those years ago wasn't Sammy, but Charlie herself, and that she was murdered, and that both Charlies are robotic duplicates of her, with Charlie being her teenage form and fourth Charlie Circus Baby being her adult form, who was filled with Henry's rage and because of that didn't turn out right. And also because of that, Henry gave up on his project to recreate Charlie and ended up ending his life. At the end of the book, Charlie and her doppelganger are killed by Henry's robot that he created to help end his life, set off by Charlie purposefully to take them both out. However, at the very, very end, while John is looking at Charlie's grave, he sees a woman in the graveyard. The book then ends rather abruptly while showing Charlie's gravestone. And that ending is what this video is about. So, as you might recall me saying in the past, my initial read-through of the fourth closet was sort of a mess. I didn't read through it. I basically read chunks of it in a very short amount of time and didn't absorb certain things. I got the gist for the most part, but there were things that I missed or didn't pick up on. I do recall reading the ending, but I didn't properly read the ending, if you catch my drift. I just basically flipped past a chunk of stuff to finish off the end because I was in a rush. And I read it, and I missed something. And because of that, I actually have to issue an apology, because I have been unintentionally misconstruing something all this time. See, there's been debates about whether the mysterious woman at the end of the fourth closet was Charlie or someone else, like Charlie's mom, and as a friend of mine theorized, maybe Jessica, because Jessica originally had brown hair. And for years, I've been like, well, of course it's Charlie. And then the graphic novels came out, and it showed a final form Charlie, and that seemed to be confirmation. For all this time, I've been poo-pooing away the debate as though it was obvious it was Charlie, and the ending is, as presented in the graphic novel, that Charlie took control of her fourth body, her adult form, and happily ever after transpired. Let me read you the end of the fourth closet. He had come into the room cautiously, afraid to wake her up. The room was dark, except for the light filtering in through the small dirty window, and she peered at him for a moment, as if she could not see him. "John," she whispered at last. "Yeah, did I wake you up?" She was so quiet for a time that he thought she was asleep. Then she murmured, "You said you loved me." The memory turned bitter here, and it had been nagging at him ever since everything ended. "You said you loved me," she said, and he had babbled nonsense in response. He stood in the gravel parking lot for a moment, feeling woefully unprepared. He tapped his hand nervously on the metal fence post, then took a deep breath and went through the gate. Slowly, he followed the path he had once watched Charlie take, hindered a little by the brace on his ankle. Most of the cemetery was as green and well kept as any park, but this corner was all scrubby grass and dirt. Two small plain tombstones sat together just beside the fence, a telephone pole rising behind them like a sheltering tree. John took a step towards them, then stopped with a sudden feeling that he was being watched. He turned in a slow circle, and then he saw her. She was standing beneath a tree just a few yards away, where the grass grew lush and green. She smiled and extended a hand, beckoning him to her. He stood where he was. For a moment the world seemed blunted. His mind had gone numb. He could feel that his face had no expression, but he could not remember how to move it. He looked back at the stones with a sharp stab of longing, then swallowed and took steady breaths until he could move again. He turned to the woman under the tree, her arms still extended, and went to her. A warm gust of wind rolled over the cemetery as they walked away together. "That's not Charlie." They were right. They were absolutely right to debate, because that is not Charlie. Or at least, that is not the Charlie we've been following in the books. And that's not her fused into her fourth body either, at least not entirely. Let's go through the telegraphing first. And remember, this ending is only 3 pages long, and it is at the very end of the book. What was put in there holds more importance than just a throwaway. John walks into the graveyard and goes up to Charlie and Henry's graves. There's brown and dead grass around them. He feels like he's being watched, and he turns to see her in the lush green grass. She smiles and beckons him. He feels numb. His face has no expression. And then, he looks back at the gravestones longingly. He swallows, takes breaths to calm himself down, and then went to her. It doesn't say how they interact. They just leave together. That's it. It would be one thing if John was just shocked, but he's not. He's visibly upset to see her. He looks at the gravestones longingly. If he in any way believed that this was Charlie, he wouldn't have looked at the graves with anything other than shock or acknowledgement. He longs for the Charlie who is dead, and thus, that is not her. And as the book ends on that note, there is absolutely nothing to suggest that when he walks over, he suddenly realizes that it is the real her. If he did, wouldn't it have said something closer? Wouldn't he have been drawn to her or something like that? No. True, it is left ambiguous, but it is ambiguously negative. John is not happy. He's sad. He's almost seems reluctant to approach this woman. She's smiling and calling him. No, she's smiling and reaching for him, but his response is hesitation. So who is this woman? Well, I believe it is fourth Charlie. It's just not our Charlie. They haven't fused. It's either a brand new version of fourth Charlie with no memory of her past, or likely due to the book's dismal tone it's ending on. It's focused throughout on this character and a few other factors. Circus baby Elizabeth fourth Charlie, who is now getting her chance to live as the real and only Charlie. There's actually some clues to this. Firstly, John's reaction to her is pretty much the same reaction he has to fourth Charlie throughout the book until he finds the real Charlie. The only difference being that this time he almost reluctantly goes to her instead of turning away and taking off, as he does at least twice. In fact, he seems to have to get his bearings and size himself up before he goes to her. Secondly, when Charlie and Circus Baby die together, and Circus Baby says, "It's not fair, I didn't have a life," Charlie struggles and pushes the Ella doll between them towards her against her chest before she dies, signifying that she is giving her the thing that keeps him alive. This doesn't seem like much, but this is going to come back later on. Another thing involves a confounding red herring narration with Circus Baby. In the beginning of the book, we see fourth Charlie's thoughts narrated as though she is the real Charlie. This is, of course, to fool the audience, as John says later that she was probably just coming up with it from bits and pieces that she already knew, and notably after Charlie wakes up, fourth Charlie stops getting these internal monologues, or at least ones like this. However, fourth Charlie tells Jessica that she sees the memories of both Elizabeth and the body of fourth Charlie before it was truly haunted. But also, we know that Charlies themselves pass on memories from body to body, despite the fact that the only thing moving along is the Ella doll. So, does fourth Charlie actually have Charlie's memories? Maybe she does. Maybe she lost them when Charlie woke up. Maybe it was all a lie. It's notable because this would play into Charlie becoming fourth Charlie, but again, the ending. Throughout the book itself, it is much more engaged with what fourth Charlie is doing than the original Charlie. It basically writes this entire plot about her feelings towards both of her fathers, how she was cheated out of having a life, and how, in a way, Charlie's survival is basically a cruel cry against nature. Because Charlie survived, adult Charlie is not getting her chance to be the real deal. And there's actually something else that supports this, and that's the fact that Charlie is, throughout the entire book, in a process of dying. Charlie is basically dying throughout the entire book. Yes, she might have been alive in the chest when they found her, but she was never recovering. She was always in this comatose sleeping state, and when she is awake, and the few times she is during the book, she seems to struggle with it, constantly having to fight herself before she passes out again. Her body is weak and frail, and then by the time of her confrontation with fourth Charlie, even though she gets a little more strength with her, a lot of her life seems to be sucked out. Indeed, in the actual novel, while fourth Charlie goes on about the past and her own feelings and stories, Charlie herself is pretty quiet and timid throughout the entire ordeal. She makes a few comments, but you can tell that a lot of the life is taken out of her. And then, she hides in the closet, tells Baby that she's not supposed to be here, and takes both of their lives with Henry's bot. She specifically says to Baby that they weren't supposed to exist, and in a way, the book seems to back this up as well. In a way, Charlie's survival is not supposed to happen. Charlie is not supposed to still be alive. She was supposed to switch into her adult body. That's why she has such problems in the Twisted Ones with fixation and everything running down. She is wearing down. It's not just from the injury in the Twisted Ones. Her body is failing her. The world is moving on without her, and it's time for Charlie to step down so that her adult self can take the reins. One of the major themes of the Fourth Closet and a huge part of John's character arc involves him grieving the Charlie he knew and coming to terms with the fact that their time together is over. He makes a book about all the things he knows about Charlie, all of the major changes between her and this new, elegant, womanly Charlie, so that he won't forget her. He lists his memories of her when they were kids, everything he can think of. But that old Charlie, even though she briefly comes back, is truly gone. And even though John pushes back the fourth Charlie as much as he can, resisting how much he wants to believe it's her because he knows something's not right, especially in the beginning of the book where he almost falls for it, he almost gives in to the illusion before he stops himself. He doesn't want to give in to the new Charlie. He's grieving the girl he knew who is either truly dead or a stage of life lost to time. This is how we know this is a tragic ending and what basically supports the idea that this isn't Charlie, this is the other Charlie, because it fits too well with John's major issue up until fourth Charlie is revealed as Circus Baby, and that's his inability to accept this major change, him trying to cling on to Charlie and keep her alive even as she's dying, and when a new form of Charlie arrives, he rejects it because it doesn't line up with what he remembers, even if part of it is still her. But in the end, he steels his nerves, gulps his fears, takes a deep breath, and with one look at her grave to remind himself that she's truly gone, he goes to the part of her that's left. It is a tragic ending. Then there's the graphic novel ending, and it is pretty important because at first it seems like the same ending except for one key difference. But the entire ending has been recontextualized and has an entirely different tone. Like the original novels, it takes place over 3 pages, ironically. John arrives at the graveyard and goes to see Charlie and Henry's graves when he notices a woman standing under a tree. It looks like a mix of Charlie and fourth Charlie, wearing a purple dress and a blue jacket, with brown boots. Notably, in the original novel, the woman is not described at all. This one is made very apparent. It cuts closer to her face, and while we don't see her eyes, we see that she has Charlie's smile. John is shocked. He walks to her, and the two walk away together, this time holding hands, with the last page being a shot of Charlie's grave. It's more than just leaving some details out, it actually adds details that were not in the original ending, and the entire vibe has completely changed. Now, whether the ending's changes were requested specifically or simply the artist's interpretation are unknown, but at the end of the day, since this is a published final version, I think we can go ahead and take it itself as the intended version. But as you can see, it's very different. Let's go through those differences. The scene of John looking back at Charlie's grave longingly has been entirely taken out. And while he looks shocked, none of his expressionless numbness and sort of building himself up to approach the woman is shown in these panels. The woman is now shown to be clearly a Charlie, with direct hints that she is the fourth Charlie, but with accents that suggest she is also the old Charlie. The biggest example of this being her smile, which is noticeably different from the fourth Charlie's smiles. Instead of just saying they left together, we actually see them specifically leaving together hand in hand. I mean, the original novel might have had them leaving hand in hand, but it didn't say so we can't make that judgment call. This one specifically at least shows it. Everything that made the original ending sad has been adjusted, and the identity of who she is fully revealed, making this a happy ending. Not one where John begrudgingly leaves Charlie's grave and goes with someone we don't know, but where he very clearly goes with final stage Charlie, with them holding hands, cementing this. And funny enough, this isn't the only change that was made to support this ending. The graphic novel does have differences, many just to shorten it for adaptation, such as entirely erasing the plot of John's Charlie book. But there's also very small differences that have a big impact. And this is where we get back to the doll scene, where there's been a slight change. One that might have been entirely unintentional, but in the context of the changed ending, kind of lines up with it. In the Fourth Closet novel, it specifically says Charlie puts fourth Charlie's hand on Ella and pushes it to her chest. She can't even smile, breathe, or talk. Then she dies. But in the graphic novel, the scene is a little different. Charlie and fourth Charlie hold hands over Ella first. Charlie smiles at her, and then she either holds Ella or pushes her towards her. It's hard to tell because at the angle it looks like she's just holding her, and fourth Charlie isn't anymore. And in the next shot, Ella's still in the same spot between them, and then they die together, with Ella still between them. Though that could have just been sort of a mistake. But see, like with the ending, the scene is technically the same, but the graphic novel has reframed it. Instead of Charlie purposefully putting fourth Charlie's hand on Ella and pushing the doll to her, giving up her life, it seems more mutual. They hold the doll together, and then it is left dangling between them. Of course, this could have just been like a simplification of the same scene, but the way this one is laid out feels more connecting than sacrificing. It's less Charlie giving up the goat, and more, for the first time, Charlie and her adult body are on the same wavelength. And that's not the only thing changed in the adaptation. It should be noted that due to the cutting of content from the books for adaptational purposes and the increased emotion expressed from Circus Baby, it frames her a lot more sympathetically and less maniacal at times, in subtle differences, such as instead of like in the book where she ambushes and attacks John and then confronts Charlie and even strangles him, in the graphic novel she approaches them outright and only strikes when they give pushback. John actually hits her first. Graphic novel Fourth Charlie Baby is more restrained and less aggressive, while Charlie at the end of the book is significantly more involved than in the original. And because of this, the ending actually fits this adaptation better. It leads into itself more that the two could and would combine. In a book where John spends a lot of time reflecting on the Charlie he lost who is slowly deteriorating before his very eyes, it makes sense that it would result in an ending where he has to accept the change and move on. However, in a book where Charlie and Fourth Charlie are both given more focus on their personal journeys and fates, it would make more sense that their ending is more focused on them and them putting aside their past to embrace her future. And while normally what a graphic novel changes would seem like small potatoes, recontextualizing the entire feel of the ending and what you're supposed to take from it is a pretty big deal. And I might be overanalyzing it, like I definitely am, but comparing those two pages together, even imagining the words as panels and the panels as words, you come up with two drastically different takes to pull from the endings. In one, a sad John walks into an unknown future, and in another one, John reunites with what is some form of his Charlie, and they leave together. The bad ending and the good one. So which is the canonical ending, or the ending you should take from the books? Honestly, I don't think it matters. I think you can choose which one you prefer because odds are we won't ever get a direct sequel to the Silver Eyes Trilogy. We may someday get a new adaptation, but that would probably have its own ending. As for which ending I subscribe to, I would say maybe the graphic novel. It's the newer adaptation, and while I didn't get into it here, I do like a lot of the changes the graphic novel made to the original books, many of them being ironically recontextualizing the feel of scenes. Honestly, I'm probably overthinking this, but I can only imagine that if I had paid a little more attention the first time I read that ending, I would have probably thought it was a sad or bad ending, and it definitely does have that melancholy feel to it. And it's interesting that when the graphic novel came out, it kind of switched up so much, and I'm still not sure why it might have done so, but honestly, I think it did it for the better, if at least to put to bed the mystery of who it was standing in the graveyard with John. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it's a book. If I didn't read too much into it, I wouldn't get my money's worth. I hope you got something out of it at least. And for now, thank you for watching.